Well, Mark, we've gotten a chance to get to know each other over the last few weeks, which is why I thought it was so meaningful to have you on Big Questions. And especially since this conversation can save somebody over the next hour. Somebody might hear it, and 58 minutes from now, when it's done, they might see something they didn't expect and save a life. So let's go straight to the moment that turned your life around or pushed it in the current direction. Tell us about cutting up some pineapple and then running into the unexpected.
All right. Well, just after my son Marcus turned 2 years old, I was cutting up some fresh fruit for him for breakfast. And now Marcus is an early riser. I'm an early riser. I was an investigator in New York City for over 26 years. So while the whole entire family is sleeping upstairs, Marcus and I come downstairs, which was custom for the two of us, to make breakfast and have breakfast together. And on that day, I cut up some fresh food for him for breakfast, and I was sitting across from him in his high chair. And not soon after that, he just, everything just, we both just froze. He froze, and I was looking at him, and I could tell something was wrong. But one thing that happens in those moments is time stands still. Everything goes into slow motion. And I couldn't quite tell what was going on, but I knew something was wrong. And then, kind of pieced it together and put it together. And the fact is that he was choking. And I froze. Like I said, I panicked, and because I didn't know what to do. Now, I ended up getting very lucky, because a few seconds later, Marcus started to violently cough. And what ended up happening is he actually coughed up the obstruction. But, in that moment, when something like that happens, here I am, really a father of four, and I didn't know what to do. I panicked, I froze. And, you start crying from gratitude that your son is alive, that your child is alive. But then quickly it turns to anger and embarrassment, because you didn't have those fundamental skills, such as how to save him from choking. And that could have cost him his life.
Did it shake Marcus up, or did he just say, "Hey, give me the next grape"?
No, he was shook up. He was crying too, because it was something that, like I said, it was a very violent cough. So, he knew something was very, very wrong. And I think it scared him as well. And I think seeing his father cry, probably for the first time, had its effect. And he could tell, I'm sure, the look of panic on my face too. So it was a very emotional moment, Cal, that I'll never forget. And it's just still gives me chills telling the story, as the years have gone by.
And so where does this take you? Because, a lot of people would have had that moment. Maybe they would have gone on the internet, Googled how to stop a child from choking. We looked at a video and thought, oh, okay, I won't feel that sense of, it sounds like there were many emotions going through, but helplessness was definitely one of them.
For sure.
But you kind of took this to another level. Something inside you pushed you to a different place.
I was very fortunate where we lived, because we lived in Connecticut, but then I also worked in New York City. And so I'd have that commute, and we actually had a local CPR instructor who advertised all over the place. So all these years of seeing this guy's name on these little signs next to the highway, and he would sponsor the highway, he was very out there, very vocal about, his desire to have everybody learn CPR. So when this happened, I thought, I need to get certified immediately. I need to learn these skills. And I'm sort of inherently, as an investigator, it wasn't about going to Google or YouTube. I needed to take it to another level. So I immediately went out and signed up for his class, and got certified in infant, child, and adult CPR, AED, and first aid. And it was in that conversation that I was having with him after the class that really started things to move for me. Because what I asked him is because I pretty much noticed I was the only parent there. Most of the people were there because they needed to be there. as a nurse or as somebody who, works in a health club.
Right.
And I said, do you have other parents come in here? And he says, but really only after there's close calls, right? Only after they've dodged a bullet do they come in here and actually learn these skills. And then I would say the next sort of thing that really caught my attention was when he asked what Marcus had choked on. And I told him it was the pineapple. And I said, but, it wasn't the hard part. I cut off the hard part, and he says, Mark, you have to think about this from a different perspective. It's not just about, hard, soft. It's also about what was the texture? What was the consistency? He said it was the fibrousness of the pineapple that, because kids eat so much, but they just kind of started clogging up, the airway. And so again, you're saying, okay, I want to take it to another level by learning CPR, getting certified, but then there's still more levels that you don't even hear about in the class. You hear about them after the class. So I thought there was a lot more research to be done to truly be able to sort of reconnect myself with my primary responsibility, really, as a parent, which is to protect my children. So I really needed to learn things at a very deep level. And then I made a vow. I made a vow to my family that I would never be caught in that position again. Never, ever be caught in a position where I didn't know what to do in an emergency.
Well, you reached an interesting place because generally when there's an emergency, the first thing we're told is call 911.
Right.
But 911 wasn't going to help you in that moment when Marcus was choking on the pineapple.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's, interesting statistic is that the average response time of 911 is over 10 minutes. Now, Marcus didn't have 10 minutes. He had seconds. So I was his 911. I was his first responder. And so I think that was something that, just was something that I really needed to focus on. It was our responsibility. And by extension, I should say, is that, it's also my wife's responsibility. Now, I'm very fortunate in the sense that my wife is actually a nurse. So she has these fundamental skills. But then when you take it to another level, we are entrusting our caregiver. We have a nanny, or a babysitter. Your parents a lot of times watch the children these days because of the dual income household. So whoever we entrust our children with also have to have these fundamental set of life-saving skills that we all should know when taking care of children.
So this became more than just you learning these skills. You realized that you needed to let everybody know that they were their own 911 because most people don't.
Absolutely not. And what was really interesting about what you just said was I really sort of saw the limitations of what that certification was in CPR when I did have that urge to tell people. I was telling one of my clients down in New York City, and he had a teenage daughter, and this was just a couple of weeks after getting certified. And so I was telling him about it, and I was all excited about it, saying, listen, you should learn these things. And he said, okay, well, why don't you tell me? Like, if my teenage daughter was choking, like, how would I save her? And then how would I perform CPR? Now, like I said, this is just a couple of weeks later, but I actually forgot the sequence. I didn't remember everything step by step. And I was like, wait a second here. What's going on? This is not good. And so I did some research, and it turns out that the average person will forget up to 60% of what they just learned within 24 hours, and within 48 hours, they will forget up to 80% of what they just learned. So it's like scoring an A on a Monday and failing that same test on a Wednesday. But we can't forget this stuff, right? Because if we forget it, you have to think about an emergency, then you have panic. Now you have to remain calm and perform a rescue sequence with a skill, right? That's those things need to be in place in order for you to really be that first responder. And so that's when, again, things started to shift for me. I really felt the calling to not only make parents aware of how serious a problem this is, but also what they can do about it to protect their family, really, from everything from CPR choking to home and fire safety, along with a lot of different other issues as well that are safety related.
And what were the statistics that you learned when you tried to see the big picture?
Yeah, the biggest picture, the biggest statistics that I saw was that, worldwide, nearly 1 million children will not make it to the age of 5. And this isn't due
That's
to
astonishing.
wars. No, it's
Yeah.
not due to war, famine, or disease. It's from unintentional injuries. And then here in the U.S., it's about 8,000, or about one child an hour.
So one child every hour in the United States of America is dying of choking, or does that include like they're sleeping in the wrong position at night? Or
Yes,
you
it's
tell me.
age specific. Yeah, it's age specific. So you'll have sudden infant death syndrome is going to be one of the leading causes from the 0 to 1 as a newborn to 1. Then it'll go from there to choking and drowning. But a lot of parents also don't even know that newborns can choke. And so they only really think about, choking when they start to eat, more consistent foods and stuff like that. But actually newborns can choke. And that could be on breast milk. It could be on formula. It can just be on excess saliva and mucus. And so there's a lot of parents who are caught off guard in that sense as well. And so again, that's all this research that I did really opened my eyes. Because again, we had 4 kids. I didn't hear any of this stuff, so it was really eye-opening.
Well, your past as an investigator really paid off here.
Oh
It
boy,
sounds
did
like, well, a little background on you. Why don't you just go over where you're from and how you became an investigator, and what exactly does an investigator do? Where did it lead you?
Well, sure. I live in California now, but back when I first started, I was in New York, and my dad was actually a pastor. And so I had just, coincidentally enough, come back from California right after high school, going to come out here to go surfing. And I came back to New York and went to a service, and my dad introduced me to this guy who had just started his own investigation company, and he needed some help over the summer. And so I didn't have anything going on, so I was like, sure. And so I ended up, working for him part-time. And then, he took me out on a surveillance one time. And, that was a really interesting experience of following somebody and making sure their story lines up. And it turns out, in fact, that particular gentleman, it did not. He was not playing by the rules, let's put it that way. So it was really interesting. And then I got into trial work later on, where I would handle cases in civil, Supreme and federal court on behalf of some of the largest insurance companies in the world.
So you're basically watching things very carefully, studying them, looking what's underneath, which is the perfect set of tools to have in order to dive into a subject like this, because now you're finding out these statistics. Now you're going through these courses. And after taking the courses, was there anything that happened that told you, man, it's a good thing I did?
Yeah. My brother and I, Eric, we went to London on a trip. And when we were in London, I happened to be reviewing, before I got home, I was reviewing a lot of the CPR and choking videos and going back through what I had learned. And little did I know how important that was going to be when I got back to my house the following week. Well, this is hard to talk about too. I had come back and I was watching both Marcus and my younger daughter Lana, who wasn't even 1 at the time. And she was sitting in this infant play seat, and what ended up happening is I needed to go to the bathroom real quick. And the bathroom happened to be right by where she was and Marcus was in the living room. And when I came back about 20 seconds later, I turned the corner and I looked at Lana, and her eyes were all red. Her nose was running and her mouth was foaming. And so
how long after you'd taken the course did this happen?
Oh, this was a matter of months, but it was a matter of days when I was reviewing all the videos on how to save somebody in this situation. So I think it would have been a completely different outcome had I just relied on my certification, months before, as opposed to reviewing and really refreshing those skills before this actually happening. So when I saw her, one of the first things that I learned is that you have to remain calm. because if you actually, go forward too quickly to the child, they could reflexively try to take a breath of air in, and then it'll cause whatever's obstructing their airway to actually go further down into their airway, making things worse. So now I was calm. And so I calmly walked over to her and I took her out of her play chair. And then I did the sequence, and I was actually able to subsequently identify what she was obstructing on. And what was amazing about it was when we were in London, I brought back a souvenir London bus, those little red buses from London. Yeah. And I gave that to Marcus. And what Marcus had done in those 20, 30 seconds that I was using the restroom was actually take off the tires of this little London bus, hand them to Lana, and she tried to swallow it. So he was kind of sharing his toy with his sister, a very nice gesture, but the tire was something that she tried to swallow, and that's what was causing her to choke.
And how did you get it out of her?
Yeah, so with the child under the age of 1, you have to do a series of 5 back slaps or back blows between their shoulder blades. And then when you turn them around to do the compressions, you can check in the mouth. And I could see something that was a little black. I didn't know obviously until it came out, but I could see that I could get it out. And something I teach is a specific finger sweep technique where you go in and around the object. You're never supposed to go in with 2 fingers like pincers, because actually that usually will just cause it to go further down. So there's a specific technique that got it out the correct way. And then
so you're going in with the pinky.
Going in with pinky. And so that's one of those things. And once that happened, you could see even under the age of 1, the sense of relief that they have. They know something's wrong, she, unlike Marcus, she bounced back real fast, and that's just her nature. She's just playing around like pretty quickly, like, oh, that was fun. That was interesting, but yeah. So that, again, I think it's just a matter of, we only panic when we don't have the skills to solve the problem. Right. So it's a matter of learning those skills so you don't panic and you can remain calm.
I love that line. We only panic when we don't have the skills to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it sounds like you're even more determined to give as many people these skills as you possibly could.
Absolutely. It really made me think of my grandfather. Because, that my grandfather was somebody, he was a pilot in World War II, he's in the Navy. And he was somebody who, no matter what situation, because he lived in Colorado and we used to go there, camping, and, wherever we went with him, we felt safe. There's this feeling of safety around him. Like, no matter what happened, if we were camping in the Rocky Mountains and, we're outside and a bear came, I think we'd probably just be like, okay, well, he's going to know what to do in this situation. And that sense of security was something as a kid, was something that was palpable. You could feel it, and I kind of wanted to be that person for my own family, as be somebody who would be ready in these emergencies, but also, like I said, reconnect other parents, fathers and mothers, to this empowering feeling of knowing what to do. And what ends up happening is you not only become a valuable member of your family, not only to your wife, your husband, your partner, and to your kids, but this skill set actually allows you to become a valuable member of the community. So one quick story is, like, after I learned to be certified, and I was talking to my brother Eric and bouncing some ideas on how I wanted to do something with this. We had a favorite Greek restaurant that I would go to and work and do a lot of writing from in New York. And he went there one day and he called me because you're never going to believe what happened. I said, what's going on? He said, we're sitting down at lunch. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting right next to this family. There's a kid in the high chair, and he starts choking. He said, "Whoa!" He said the mother gets up, takes the kid out of the chair, calmly takes the kid out of the chair, clears the obstruction, puts him back in the chair, and they all just keep on eating, just like as if nothing happened. And he said, this is a quote from him, so I'm not in trouble for saying. He's like, that was a badass mom. Because she didn't flinch. She took care of it. And so I draw that line to the community, because I have no doubt that mom, if that was happening to somebody else, whether that was an adult or a child in that restaurant or in her community, that she would, without hesitation, help that family.
So it sounds like you just decided to take this as far and wide as you possibly could. Do I got it right?
Yeah. Some of the things that we're working on is really meant to have a worldwide impact, not just here in the US.
Where does that start?
Well, for me, the way I believe that we can have the most impact is actually in the hospitals. In addition to connecting with parents and locally, and also on social media and through my book, but also I over 3.6 million babies are born in the United States alone every single year. And I know that when we had, and you have, I believe, three children, and I think you probably agree that every time you left the hospital, you never thought, I got this, no problem. The child's going to be safe. It was always a sense of like extreme anxiety, whether it was the first or the fourth, or in your case, the third. It's just a matter of you're really leaving the comfort of that hospital and the doctors and nurses who are there 24/7 for you. And now you're bringing this baby home and just kind of hoping things go well. It's like the wild, wild west, as somebody from a local hospital.
Every parent goes through that, and even when you learn how to safely install the child seat on that first day, you're constantly looking at it, making sure it's in snug enough. We all feel it.
Absolutely. And so I think that training, that education should really start in the hospital. But in so many cases, even before that, so about 8 weeks before the child is even born, ideally you'd start that conversation because of actually what you just mentioned, how important it is to have that car seat safely installed. That should be installed about 8 weeks before the child is due to give birth, just in case they come a little early. Like I would never want to be in the hospital.
Nobody ever does that.
They don't.
The day after the birth. Yeah.
That's right. And but it's so important. It's so important. It's one of those, it gets back to the fundamentals. This is a fundamental, a car seat properly installed. How important is that? And I think it's just like you said, it's like a lot of things that are easily missed. It's easy to do. It's easy not to do. And therein lies the problem. Right. So we want to make sure that we start that education process as early as possible.
So how did you decide to go forward to let everybody know, hey, if you are the parent of a young one, every hour, a young one in America is dying because they're choking or having something unexpected happen? How did you go about getting out the word, and what were you trying to create in order to educate them?
Well, I knew it had to come from multiple directions. And so the number one thing for me was because of our memory, how we learn visually, we have poor memory. So I know I needed to have a training that was available 24/7 on demand, anywhere, anytime, and from nearly any device, right? Whether you're on your phone or your computer.
So you wanted something that people could actually hit in real time and see, oh, that's how you do it.
Absolutely. Not only an action sequence, you can actually see what it would look like in an emergency scenario. But also I have an action sequence, let's say for baby choking and CPR, but I also have a longer form, and I break down every step why it's important. And so I think, for me, as I sort of mentioned earlier, this is another thing that we just kind of forget, is that how important it is for the babysitter or any caregiver to know these things. So I encourage parents, listen, pay them an extra $5 or whatever, have them come 15 minutes early. And here you can really lay out, everything that they're supposed to know that's age specific for their children. And you can get these refreshers, and within 15 minutes, you can know, and have access to if there's a problem. And then I also created, on top of that, is a babysitter's checklist. So this is just a checklist that a family can go through with their babysitter, and it kind of hits on all the major points. And then in my book, we take things to a completely different level. So we encourage them to have both available, so they can kind of reference the challenges that each specific child will have, such as severe allergies like both my daughters have. Like my babysitter has to know, and my caregiver, like any daycare center, they have to know how to use an EpiPen. All right. And there's a whole sequence to that. And in a panic state, you could forget some of that, and that could be a disaster. So, so these types of things that we really encourage families to really be proactive about it. Take a step back, do a walk through the inside of your home, the outside of your home. What are some of the challenges that they may have, whether it's a pool or just outdoor water sources, fields, any number of things. What are those challenges that might confront this babysitter and cause a safety concern? Identify them, list them, and discuss them. And you can do all of this within, like I said, about 15 minutes to half an hour.
So what's the name of your book?
It's called Emergency. This book will save your child's life.
Well, that is definitely a lapel-grabbing title.
And it also says on there, it says prepare for the unexpected. So, the other title of the book that I was thinking of was, the most, like the famous, most well-read in multiple languages, pregnancy book is, what to expect when expecting.
Right.
And when I was thinking about this process, I'm like, well, I think what should also be in there is what you don't expect when expecting.
Yeah. What should you expect when you're not expecting, which is exactly what the point is here. Because, you're carving up the pineapple, maybe throwing some grapes, and little pieces of apples in there. You're just not expecting your kid to start to choke.
Right.
And I'm glad you told everybody about that maneuver with the pinky to just sweep around and make sure that you don't push anything down. So you've got these videos assembled as well. Right. Where do people get those?
Well, if you go to ourchildskeeper.com, you can learn about the company and the behind the company and why we're here and what we do, and also meet our family. But we have access to a masterclass video series. So in the masterclass, like I said, we cover everything, whether you're an expecting parent to a new parent with a child under the age of 1, but then we also grow with your family. So we want to make sure that we cover things, because drowning, for instance, is the number one cause of death for kids all the way up to the age of 14. So you want to have these skills. Like there's no age that your child is going to be at where you don't need to have refreshers on these skills. So we want to make sure that we have this comprehensive training that follows you as your children get older.
And so this is great, starting it in the hospitals, because when you've got moms who have just gone through the birth process and are so connected to their child, they're probably going to be highly attentive at that point, and dads as well. You're seeing the fragility, and it's anybody who's a parent knows what that's about, especially the first time. Maybe by the 6th kid, it's okay, get it, move them out.
Maybe 6 is the magic number, Cal. Yeah, maybe so. But certainly first one and second one, you really do have that sense of how you are completely dependent upon to take care of this young person. And so what you're doing is you're basically compiling a staircase of information. So as the child grows, you grow in information and skills and techniques. And how much does all this cost? Well, we priced it at $147. And the beautiful thing about that, it's a one-time access fee. So you can literally access this information for years. That's number one. Number two is we highly encourage you, unlike a lot of others, is we highly encourage you to share it. Like give this to your parents, give this to, whoever's taking care of your kids, give them access to it, have them, look at the stuff and make sure they know what to do as well.
That's interesting when you think of it in terms of how many people you can touch with it. The price goes down and down and down and down and down.
Yeah, it's literally pennies when you think about how many years, that you can actually access the information. Yeah.
Okay, this is beautiful. And when people hear about what you're doing, how do they respond?
Usually just a lot of aha moments. Like in a conversation, I tend to throw out a few things that they've just never heard of before.
Like what?
Well, such as never feed your child in the car seat. Now that may seem like, okay, well, so what's the deal with that? Well, really think about it. We talked about choking a lot because it's a leading cause, and choking is a silent event. So if you're driving your car, you're focused on the highway, and you happen to toss some food back to your, or hand some food back to your children while you're
That's
driving.
all you do.
That's
Yeah.
Cal, we did that with all 4 of our kids. This was
of course. You want them to shut up. Yeah. That's what you do.
It's you're literally pacifying them with food, right? It's just trying to make but the thing is that therein lies the danger, right? Because you're not going to hear when they are choking, and let's say they become unconscious. What are you going to think if they become unconscious? You're not going to know that. You're going to think they just fell asleep.
Oh, unless you see them in the rear view mirror, because you're just handing it back.
You're just handing it back. And so that's one. And I think I'd say the most powerful second one is to, when we talk about home and fire safety, make sure the family not only has a fire escape plan, but also that the family has a designated meeting place. So if there was
you got
a fire,
great story about that. You got a great story. Why don't you just tell that story? That's an amazing story. Yeah. Amazing. So, it's really sad, but
it is
informative.
It is. Yeah, well, it was yet another conversation with this CPR instructor that I had. It was a story of his, and we were kind of talking about these issues way beyond, the usual first aid, CPR stuff. And what he was basically saying that a childhood friend of his, they had a home fire, and in the middle of the night, the entire family needed to get out of that house. And so sure enough, they all go out. But what ended up happening is that most of the family members went through the front door, and they're all there, and they realized that the sister is still not accounted for. So he goes back into the home to look for the sister, and he ends up passing away. And what ended up happening is the sister actually went out the back door, whereas everybody went through the front door. So she was safe in the backyard and probably in a state of just frozen and, shock. They didn't know she was there. So if they had a designated meeting place where the whole entire family knew this is where we meet in a fire, or an emergency, this is the one place we meet, then they could have accounted for, and really, they would have known that she was fine, because she would have just come right around and went to the designated meeting place, and then the father would still be alive to this day. So it's one of those stories that is just so sad, but I think the more parents who hear it, as hard as that story is to tell, because we really think about how traumatic that is and how sad that is, tragic that is. But that story is really something that I think has gotten the most, one of the best responses as far as, I am going to do that. And that's actually on the babysitter's checklist. We actually put how to create that fire escape plan, and also like map a diagram of your home and, the exits of each room and all that kind of stuff, really map that out. And I would say the last little thing, I'll just throw this last little one in, because we talked about home and fire safety, which again was something I did not know, but when I read it was amazing, was never be more than 6 seconds away from a fire extinguisher.
Whoa, I never thought of that one.
But doesn't that make sense? 6 seconds. And so what we did was we immediately got, that's what we did. We sort of mapped out the house, and then you have cabinets all over the place. We would just put the fire extinguisher. And I think the beauty is, like, as you and I were growing up, when I thought of fire extinguisher in school, there were these huge fire extinguishers that were super complicated. You have to break glass to get to them, So when I first thought about this, I'm like, this is super impractical. But what's beautiful now is with the technology is they actually have these fire extinguishers, which we have throughout our whole entire house, which look like a can of hairspray. And that's how easy they are to use. And they're made in a way, we have links to those in our site, in our products page, but it's an amazing thing, so even a babysitter can just look at it and know what it does. It doesn't have to sit there and read an instruction manual. And I guess that would be a really good sort of tip too, is whatever you have, whatever preventative tools you have in the home, it's one thing to have them. The second part is you got to make sure the person who's entrusted with the care of your child, whether that's your parents or whoever it is, even your spouse, knows how to use them, right? You can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't know how to use them, it's just,
What all this gets to is what you stated at the very beginning. We are all our own 911. We can't sit around and wait for somebody to come by and save us. It's best to be proactive in these situations. And, listening to you tell this story is intriguing to me, how you turned your whole background as an investigator sort of upside down, whereas instead of looking at things after the fact and trying to figure them out, you're trying to predict everything unexpected that might happen and offer a solution to stop it from happening.
Right. I had a mother, I was talking to, and she had two little girls. Now she has a third. And the third, much like my youngest daughter, Lana, she seeks danger like 100% of the time, right? She's an adventurous little girl, and she's fantastic, but it just gives you this level of like, you have to be aware, you have to be watching her at all times. And like, for instance, like her daughter loves electrical sockets. That's terrible, baby. I mean, that's one of the worst things, so in other words, she had to be present. And so what she told me was,
they got plugs for that, you just plug them in.
Yeah, they do. But what ends up happening is other members of the family will plug things in, they'll take it out, and they'll forget to put you know what I mean? So it's just a matter of setting the scene. But what she said was, awareness is a skill, right? So if you're looking down at your phone, you're not looking up at them. You need to have awareness, not only of the problem, but you have to have situational awareness. You need to be actually watching your child. Now, if I was not sitting across from Marcus when he was eating this fruit and watching him as he ate, and let's say he wasn't able to cough it up, and I was, going around multitasking while he was eating food, it would have been a disaster, So watch your children when they're eating their food, at the very least. You're giving them a bath. Set the scene, bring everything with you, so you're always within arm's length of them and in the bathtub. Never have to go and get something, right? While the baby's in the bathtub, whether it's shampoo, clothes, towels. That's what I mean. It's about being aware of the situation that you're in, and what can I do to prevent me having to leave the scene? And then if something does happen, do I actually know? Do I remember? Is it an actual skill where I can remain calm? Ask these questions of yourself. And if you can answer it in the affirmative across the board, then you're doing a great job.
Well, you've done a great job in actually changing the way I think, because I've always been a very spontaneous person. Mm-hmm. What you've just told me in this last 40 minutes or so has made me think about the preparatory life, the life of just being prepared, so that when the unexpected happens, you can react to it like that mom in the Greek restaurant that you described.
Right.
Because that's the ultimate, when you can just look at it and say, okay, I got this. let's get on with it. Bring on dessert.
Yeah. It's a superpower. It really is, especially these days. And it feels great. It really gives you a level of confidence as a parent, and you feel like you're serving your family by knowing these things. It's fantastic.
I am going to try to think of all of the elements in my life like this. It may make me overreach, and it may cause my mind to explode. But it just as an experiment, I'm just going to sit around and think of all the things I'm not prepared for. Mm-hmm. And what could I do? And I'm going to start with those little fire extinguishers and make sure we have one in 6 seconds. Mm-hmm. So I want to say thank you. It's great knowing you. Just for you to tell everybody who's got a young kid, and you don't even have to have the young kid yourself, because if you're the grandpa and you're with the young kid, then you are 911.
That's right.
You're the babysitter, then you are 911. You're the 100%. Nanny, you are 911. So for everybody to think like this is very empowering. And I applaud everything you're doing to try to make everybody as aware as possible and give them the tools to save lives. 1 every hour is being lost. you never know. Maybe this information is going to help somebody listening to this podcast do something about it.
Well, I certainly hope so. Thank you so much. It's been an honor, Cal.
Okay. Well, thank you. And good luck on your journey to educate the world.
Thank you, Cal. Appreciate it.
All right. Cheers, brother.
Cheers.